Here we are.
I just wanted to kick us off on a weird note.
Boo! Scorpio season. Boo!
A little freaky over here today.
Well, hello, all my spooky friends. Welcome to the weekend edition of the Nightlight Astrology podcast, where all your weekend astrology dreams come true. I'm your co-host, Alex Amorosi, along with Whitney Krantz and Alexandra Blair. We are excited to be here with you today. We're going to look at two famous Scorpio study or strong Scorpio placement, famous actors in their charts. But before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Adam is enrolling currently for his year one astrology program, which is phenomenal. We have all been through it. Alexander, you've been through twice now, right?
No, see, I went after I joined the program. Adam was like, "You should take year one," and I was like, "I'm a professional astrologer, Adam," and he was like, "Humble yourself, lady, and take the class." And I'm so glad that he did, because it's an incredible program.
Yeah, it's an amazing, whatever level of astrology you're practicing, Adam is really a very, very talented teacher. I mean, I've put together training programs for 20 years. He is the real deal. He puts together an incredible
I've actually
program.
got other professional astrologers to sign up for year one, because it is actually revolutionary if you're studying Hellenistic astrology.
Yeah, it's an amazing program.
And such a wealth of knowledge to be able to go back and reference too. Like, I can't tell you how many times I go back and reference those courses, right? And all the bonus materials that you don't even cover. It's amazing.
There's a lot of bonus material. I remember when I got it, I was like, wow. This is like all this like back reading to do and everything. It's just an incredible course. So that's November 8th that he's enrolling for, at the beginning of that program. Also, the Nightlight Astrology fam is going to Mexico on a retreat next year. It looks awesome. I believe it's the introduction of Adam's year 4 curriculum. So that is all available on nightlightastrology.com. We now are going to jump off the diving board and into the watery depths of Scorpio. More Scorpio. Yes, and we're all wearing our Scorpio fashion. Let's just show it off.
Astro style, that's what they
I don't
call
make it
it
sound really scary, though. I just make it sound super gay. I'm like, oh, here we are. Do I look cute in my black? Yeah.
Spooky queers, rise up.
Spooky queers, rise up. Here we are. Yeah. I love my spooky queers. I have a really fun spooky queer friend. But anyways, how in Scorpio season, to me, especially where I live on the East Coast, Northeast coast of the United States, Scorpio season to me is I love cozy season. This is cozy season, but it's also like when you get out into Scorpio season, there's this wonderful feeling of like the leaves are starting to fall and there's that musty, earthy smell. And it's just like things are just starting to get quiet, even though I think a lot of our lives are getting busier at this time of year, which kind of goes against the grain of that light cycle. But there's just such a feeling of like, stillness is coming. We're coming into a more still, more calm energy feeling. And I always think of that this time of year with like, especially in October here in New England, like the beautiful leaves that are, so gorgeous this time of year, but they're all falling. And then there's this sort of musty, earthy smell that just grounds you and pulls you down into this very cozy place. So I'm just wondering how you guys are experiencing Scorpio season for yourselves.
Yeah, growing up in California, I always associated this season with the slanty shadows being cast. And it was the rise of darkness in the realm of light. It's like it's daytime, but there's this foreshadowing around every corner. You cross behind a building, living in San Francisco in my 20s, there's like this Mark Twain quote that there's no colder winter than a summer in San Francisco. That's like the experience of fall in San Francisco. You walk around a building and you get into the shade and you are freezing, but you come back into the light and you're sweltering. So I feel like there's this kind of fun, interesting world walking that's happening where darkness is growing and we get these ominous, nostalgic, evocative, long sideways shadows being cast by everything in the cold, dark side of buildings, but we're somehow still kind of walking in the light during the day.
I love that. And I love that you bring up San Fran too, because did you know this? I moved to San Fran when I was 18. And yeah, so I was there for only 2 years. And yes, it was that first fall in San Francisco was like let me bring the biggest backpack I have so that I can bring a sweatshirt and a t-shirt to change into when the fog clears. And yes, that sort of vibey, low-hanging mist. Oh, that's so perfectly Scorpio. But alas, I live in Minnesota, the land of the North, where typically by Scorpio season, we've at least gotten a snow, maybe 2. But it is, I kind of had this visceral response, Alex, when you said the leaves fall and they start crunching on the ground, and it reminds me of like the death and the decay and the detritus, right? That Scorpio is so known for. And then like what happens in Minnesota is it freezes over and then it lasts, and it's such a, I don't know, this is my favorite time of year to like light a fire, light all the candles, just like keep the lights off even at night, and just like chill by the candlelight, because it can really lend to some good vibes, that's for sure. Good spooky vibes.
Right? Because it can be beautiful too. I think that's something about Scorpio, we mentioned in our Dignities episode too, is that darkness, we hear darkness and I think it's almost immediate that we think bad. We think evil, we think wrong. It's just kind of an association, the subconscious that, is made with the word, but it's far from it. Darkness, it can be, into those extremes, the dark side of darkness, as we say. But the darkness is also, there's something beautiful about it. The leaves that we see, here in New England, it's just part of fall here, and it gets crazy. People going out to see the leaves and do all that stuff. But there's a sense of like, it's beautiful, but the leaves are dying. The leaves are going, and they are going to also be regenerative material for next spring, right? That's part of the whole cycle that's going on. I think that Scorpio is such a necessary aspect of our understanding that that the darkness can be beautiful, can be cozy. It can be a place where we rest. I think we forget often about the regenerative quality of darkness. We sleep in the darkness. We are born from darkness. Those are places where we're also kind of held, and we need that sort of more restful space. But Scorpio also understands, I think, that idea of the intensity is like that transformative fire indicated by Mars, the crucible indicated by Mars, that's necessary to turn something into something else, to turn the dead leaves of the fall into the material that will be life generating for the opposite season, Taurus, in the spring. So it's very, I don't know, it's one of my favorite times of year. But anyways, we're going to take, go ahead, Alexandra.
I was just going to say, it's time to boot up the spirit board.
Yes, exactly. The veil is thin.
Get in touch with some people.
Which actually was an amazing segue into our first chart. Amazing segue, who received her first Oscar and is for a role as a medium, as a psychic medium. And that is the incomparable Whoopi Goldberg. If you guys will see this chart, this is just, if we look at the technical astrology of just this chart, is pretty remarkable. So she has 4 planets in Scorpio: Mercury, the Moon, the Sun, and Saturn. She has Pluto conjunct Jupiter. And if you watched our Dignities episode, we talked about how Pluto has a lot of affinity with Scorpio. There was a lot of deep similarities between Pluto and Scorpio. Mm-hmm. She also has, it may not be in your chart, Alexandra, it's okay, but her Venus is conjunct Antares, which is by precession now in at 9 degrees of Sagittarius, which is also a very intense fixed star. It's the watcher of the West. And it's almost like every signature in this chart is touched by that transformative intensity of a Pluto, Scorpio, Antares, subsurface and regenerative power. It's just a remarkable. When I pulled this up and I was kind of just looking famous Scorpios, I'm like, oh wow, look at Whoopi Goldberg's chart. And I thought what's so interesting about this is in 1991, she wins her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in Ghost, literally playing a psychic medium who's talking to Patrick Swayze's character, who I can't remember the name of, who's a ghost. And my favorite line ever, when she just walks up to Demi Moore, Molly, you in danger, girl. That's your Scorpio friend. That's your Scorpio friend right there. They have got your back. I gotta let you know that you're in danger.
You're in danger, girl.
You're in danger, girl. But it's a little bit like when we were talking about Julie Andrews and we were talking about Kate Winslet for Libra season. It's always interesting to me, coincidentally or synchronistically in astrology, somebody's chart, the roles they're called towards, and sometimes the big sort of like flashpoints in their career. And around this time, Pluto was conjunct her sun, which I think is so interesting. Pluto moving through Scorpio is coming into conjunction with her sun, just moved past the conjunction with her moon a few years earlier. And in the 10th house, I don't know what to say about this symbolism, you guys. It's like perfect symbolism for a recognition, a visibility about the ability to straddle two worlds, which is something I think that Scorpio does really well. Obviously Libra does, but there's this sense of like I can straddle the spirit world and the material world, and she's recognized in such a public way for her portrayal of someone who does that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just even thinking about the stellium and this line of planets in the 10th house and thinking about the way that Whoopi Goldberg looks and seems and comes across is like a little intimidatingly spooky scary. This is something like she's talked about, and a lot of actresses and women have to negotiate this, right? Like being intimidating as a woman. But I'm saying Whoopi Goldberg looks like she has secrets. That's what I'm saying. It's slightly different. It's like, ooh, that's somebody who I want on my side. That's somebody who's keeping track. We talked in our Scorpio episode about the Scorpio eyes that are tracking more deeply than the average person. And I feel that so much from this 10th house Scorpio stellium. I also was kind of interested in how her sun, which is the ruler of her 7th, in Scorpio, is up here conjunct this Saturn. And I was looking into some of her relational history, and like her first husband, I think, was a drug counselor. I think that's such a common thing for people with these deep Scorpio placements, to be seeking out other people who have the capacity to speak to the depth and the less socially discussed elements of our collective human experience. I would definitely imagine things like a drug counselor or a grief counselor, as we talked about on the Scorpio episode, would be able to do that.
Well, and did you know that she actually married her own drug counselor? She went through a bout of heroin addiction when she was like 18 years old. And yes, her first marriage was her heroin counselor or her drug counselor, recovery. I mean, and right with Pluto and Jupiter in the 7th, I think that like ties in beautifully, right, in aspect to that right there. It's so interesting. And, Alex, you started with, how famous she is for this role in Ghost, as for communicating with the dead. And one of the things we talked about in our Scorpio Dignities episode is, just really this natural affinity that Scorpios have for death and dying. And I one of the fun facts I looked up about Whoopi, and I don't know a ton about her character, right? But she actually worked in a funeral parlor while she was taking her small roles on Broadway. Credit IMDb for that knowledge. Thank you.
She wasn't waitressing.
No,
like so many actors in New York do,
Yeah, she worked in a funeral parlor and as a bricklayer, which is like kind of an interesting juxtaposition to that as well.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to me too, that like around this time, right, where Pluto's coming around the sun, I think it was the next year that Sister Act came out. Mm-hmm. And another huge hit movie of hers, which I say because it's a huge hit for me. I don't know if it's an actually huge hit, but it's a huge hit for me. And it brings about another sort of interesting quality of Scorpio that I don't think gets talked about a lot, which is in that movie, she's sort of discovering her truest essence, right? I'm not going to get into a huge psychoanalytical description of Sister Act here, I promise. But what I'm saying is, like, she goes into the convent, where she in some she has to discover her innate gift and helps other people bring it out in her own truest sense. She's truest to herself, right? And there's a deception that she has to reveal at the end to all the sisters that she's not actually in it and all that stuff. By the way, if that's a spoiler, you guys, again, reprioritize your life and go see Sister Act. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you need to see it. It's amazing. But there's something to me about Scorpio too, about getting to the truest essence of something. This is something I have in my Scorpio friends. I have a very good friend who's ruled very strongly from Scorpio. And he says that almost all the time. We're getting to the truest essence of this. We're getting to the base of this. We're discovering that little spark that is in you that is absolutely true to who you are. And there's something to, again, we know that this is a role, but this is a role she's drawn to. This is a role she plays through. And I think that actors, particularly when they're working through roles, they tend to gravitate towards roles that really embody some natural part of themselves. So that's just something I was noticing too.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting to see. This is the release date for Sister Act, May 29th, 1992. And she has really been outspoken about the fact that she was raised Catholic. So I think it's interesting that we have this lineup in Gemini where her IC is actually, and the Pluto-Sun connection, and Saturn on the ascendant. I think the Pluto-Sun comes back around because I had heard that she delivered merchandise or props from this film actually to Pope Francis as a gift. So I feel like that really taps into the sun in the 10th, and like religious figures and solar figures.
Wow. Oh, I love that fact. That is so interesting. Oh my gosh. And this depth of connection with the spirit realm and depth of connection with religious figures. It's so interesting because, this is going to be quite the millennial reference, but I don't know. Did anyone ever watch Captain Planet as a kid, the cartoon?
I did not.
Oh my gosh, you are missing out. Okay, Captain Planet, with our powers combined, we will save the world. That was the whole thing, right? Well, Whoopi actually voiced a disembodied character in Captain Planet, and she was the voice of Gaia, of Mother Earth. Basically, there are these, 5 kids who are, tasked with saving the world, each from, a different area of the world. And so this voice of Gaia, right, as Whoopi Goldberg, this is one of my earliest memories of her and her super, super distinctive voice, right? That she is basically Mother Earth in this show. I think that's a really interesting tie-in.
That reminds me that she played a character called Guinan in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Yeah, that's one of my main Whoopi moments, like a wise bartender in a futuristic place, which is so funny for an Aquarius ascendant.
Yes. Oh, that's good.
It totally is. It's a remarkable chart. Just looking at the technical astrology of this chart too. If you put this birth date and you say, like, this is someone with a remarkable amount of intensity. It's just every major aspect of this chart is touched by a really by a signature of deep truth and intensity. So it's just really interesting to look at. Shall we go on to contestant number 2?
Sure.
Oh boy. Scorpio shows up in a lot of different ways. Here is the incomparable, God rest his soul, Robin Williams. 12 degrees of Scorpio rising. One of the things I think that's really interesting to look at, maybe because one of the ways I unwind is by watching comedy. It's kind of like my wind down thing to do, just especially when you've had a day of, working through a lot of difficult stuff, just to relax. I always watch some comedy. And I think comedians are really interesting because especially what their specialty is. And Robin Williams was a master mimic. He was a master impersonator, yes. Right? He had the ability to just pull out. You watch, I was watching him even on interviews. He just sits down and all of a sudden he's in 12 different characters, all in succession. It all kind of makes sense. They're all hilarious. And I was looking at it in this chart, and before we get to the Scorpio aspects of it, definitely, look at all the water in this chart, my friends. So you have an ascendant at 12 Scorpio, Sun in Cancer, Mars in Cancer, Uranus in Cancer, Moon ostensibly conjunct the North Node in Pisces. Right, so those major signatures of the chart all in water. And one of the things that made me really think of was water's ability to absorb, water's ability to shape the container, form the shape of the container that it's in. And I think that, with comedians, all comedians seem to have a sort of specialty of what they're able to be good at, the type of story they tell, the way they engage with their comedy. And obviously Robin Williams was like one of the classic comedians, but his ability to impersonate and that ability to sort of absorb information, absorb from the world and the environment around. I actually think I'm not really great with the ancient texts, you guys, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's something about the water signs being able to do that in the ancient classical texts. There's like sort of an absorption or reflection quality that comes up in those signs. That's just something I noticed here. We can talk in a second about some of his roles, but what are you guys noticing in this chart? You're muted, Alex.
At myself. I think Robin Williams has one of those faces that we have talked about in relation to Scorpios, all Scorpio season, where you can tell from their eyes. I feel like a Scorpio rising can, some rising signs, like I think I look like a Cap rising. Okay, I think all Cap risings kind of look the same. But a Scorpio rising is something you can see right here. It's just the posture of the eyes towards the world, I feel, is how I can tell when somebody's a Scorpio rising. And I think Robin Williams is such a great example of that because of the styles of comedy that we're talking about. Particularly, you're talking about mimicry, yes, and with a different type of comedian who is good at impersonations, you feel like you are really being transported. I feel like Robin always brought a little bit of himself and that depth quality with the eyes where it's like, oh, there's something behind this. There's a shrewdness. And I think you see that in works as well, like Dead Poet Society, which is kind of one of my key entry moments for Robin Williams in my childhood. And I remember my dad showing me that movie. And there's such a depth behind and beyond what's going on. It's pretty interesting that he has his, chart ruler Mars in fallen Cancer conjunct Uranus. There's a lot of that's a rabbit hole we could definitely go down, for hours on a limited series about Robin Williams astrology. But I think also Pluto, having Pluto in his 10th house up there pretty close to his MC, gives this sense that there is some depth to him and depth that he is known for, and also that regenerative quality that I don't think we normally would associate with improv, which is another part of his style. Like, I think when we think improv, we're thinking the buffoonery of Mercury and Gemini or Sagittarius type. He has this death rebirth improv thing. It's so much deeper than this surface level. I think that's why people really respond to his work.
And it's so much a part of who he is, right? And I kind of see that with, I think the Mars Uranus in Cancer obviously contributes to all sorts of different resonations in his life, but I feel like that being involved in this grand water trine of Dharma, right? These are the Dharma houses, what makes us us. It lends to this character, this person who can display so many characters in such an accurate manner, yes, but also, with that trine to the moon, this different sense of depth. I think that's one of the things that really resonates about all of the characters that Robin Williams has played, is that even the funny ones, there's another layer of depth to them, right? And yeah, the dark ones can go really dark and the funny ones are super funny, but still have that layer of sort of complication and the complicated soul, right?
I love that you said that, Winnie, because I was thinking when he plays dark, it's dark. It's very, very dark, and he goes there in a way where there's a movie from 2000, I think it's the early 2000s, called Insomnia, that is with Al Pacino, and it's for anyone who lived through the the sort of Twin Peaks era of the 90s. It has that kind of feel. There's a detective, a crime that needs to be solved way up in northern Alaska. And he plays a very, very scary person. And it's not like creepy in your face. It's what's, like we just keep saying about the eyes, it's what's being held back that I think is something that's so interesting. It's like the secret that he knew how to play that, like, I'm holding in a certain amount of really scary rage or whatever in this character. I'm saying for this character that could come out at any moment, and you can feel that in his performance. But you also feel that, like, in his really funny roles, you feel a different sense of that, not the same sort of rage. But something like Mrs. Doubtfire, it's not a trivial story, Mrs. Doubtfire, even though it's really, really funny, and his ability to sort of just inhabit this character that he creates is incredible. But it has a very powerful message behind it about the realities of divorce, about the reality, of what that can do with a family and to kids and stuff like that. And so I feel like, and God knows, my very favorite movie of all time, Good Will Hunting, where he plays, a therapist who's gone through his own significant trauma and mentoring. I always think of that Ninth House Mars and Cancer with that, that kind of role. Mm-hmm. There's something none of his roles feel like, even though they're really, really funny, there's a depth back behind them. There's something that's a message about something that's a reality that might be difficult, which is very, very Scorpio. Things that might be difficult to talk about, but can be expressed in ways that can be a little lighter. But also roles like Insomnia when he plays Dark, which are just very, very creepy dark roles.
Mm-hmm. Did you all ever watch What Dreams May Come? That was also early 2000s, and it was so good. That was one of, probably, because I was like in my early adolescence when I watched that, and I remember like seeing it in the theater with my dad, because my parents were divorced, and I always had Monday date nights with my dad, and we would always go watch a movie, because what do you do, with your daughter, right? Monday date nights. And so we saw What Dreams May Come, and it had this profound experience. I had a profound experience with it, because basically the plot line of this movie begins with Robin Williams' character's wife's death by car crash, I believe. And so then the movie basically follows his underworld journey to find his wife in the realm of death, right? And it was so fascinating to me, and really, like, the chart pulses with that energy, right? Like Scorpio rising is the underworld journey, right? And
Pisces moon. The Pisces moon with all the imagery.
The Pisces moon north node opposite that Venus
opposite
south
Venus
node.
South node. Yes, that's exactly what I was about to say. And I think that's really interesting, because, not to get too personal, but I have that same opposition, but mine is flipped. I have Moon South Node Virgo, Venus North Node Pisces, right? And so that, like, that made me feel things about the way that sort of like love transcends all realms, right? That even in this earthly body experience, there is more. There is more to spirituality. There is more to love, right? And I think it really speaks to that opposition there. I love it.
That's something really interesting that I did recently on my channel, just to say. On my Astro Weirdos episode with Liz Manuel, we actually went back and we looked at different art that had deeply spoken to us and affected us at different points in our lives. And so, for example, we looked at a time where I was down in the dumps, let's say, and we looked at all the transits that were happening, and then we looked at the art. It was an album that had come out years prior, but it was really speaking to me, and the album's release date, Astrology, actually spoke to the same places in my chart that the transits were hitting. So I feel like that's kind of what you're touching on here too,
yes.
Whitney. It's like this movie that you went to see actually just spoke directly to what you needed in that moment. It's really interesting.
God, I love astrology.
We could literally talk about it all day. We might. We might. Who knows? Grab another cup of tea, folks. We're gonna be good.
Yeah.
But Yeah, and I think it's so important, I think, to look at the experiences or the synchronicities. That's why I love looking at actors, right, or comedians, just seeing how it's reflected in their lives, or the roles that they take on, that they just happen to take on, or that they're offered, or that they gravitate towards, and to look at signs from a very from a multidimensional standpoint, because I think it's very easy to get into like, well, Scorpio is like this. This is how it would show up. This is a water sign. This, water signs show up as feeling and whatever. It's like they can show up in these incredibly varied, interesting, multidimensional ways that when you learn about the archetype of the sign, it starts to make a lot of sense. Like I just think about, I think about like Good Will Hunting, and I think about how Robin Williams, even though he's the mentor in that movie, is going on a transformational journey of his own. It's a very Scorpio, moving through intense grief, moving through the paralyzation that sometimes happens, from intense grief, and the ability to transmute through that. And to have, in that movie too, to have the presence of knowing exactly, and this is the I think the helpful side of the Scorpion sting, knowing exactly when to go in. That character knows exactly when to go in with Matt Damon and bring on what he needs to hear, right? To go to the place that he needs to go. Those synchronicities in a character that an actor might take on, that I think, like Alexandra, you were saying, like there's maybe something about him in each of these, right? There's a little bit of him in his mimicry. There's a little bit of him in there. There's just, that's what I think often makes a great actor, at least in my eyes, is that you can see there's just a little bit of themselves that they're bringing forward. And I especially think of that scene in the end of Good Will Hunting, where he's really, that's a very Scorpio type of therapist. Like they just know exactly the right timing to bring something up and how to bring it up to bring about a regeneration, to bring about a catharsis or freedom from something. And so it's just, it's a beautiful chart. But yeah, these are just a couple that we wanted to look at, my friends, and offer some points on Scorpio. Especially, I wanted to bring up some points about water signs, that ability of water signs to imitate, mimic, that sort of idea. But any last thoughts, my friends, on this chart before we begin to close down?
I feel like his chart is so interesting because a lot of the eulogies that people had delivered or wrote to memorialize him referenced his ability to speak to humanity, which is such a big word. It's like, what does that mean, and how would we look for that in a chart? But it's funny because there's just so many different places in his chart where you could really see that. We see these conjunctions with these big generational outer planets. We see a Pisces moon is pretty oriented around humanity, but so is, Mercury conjunct the MC and that Venus moon opposition that we talked about. There's so much there, and there's so much depth. And I also wanted to emphasize the grand water trine in his chart, which is kind of what we're living through right now. And so maybe there's some little grand water trine beauty in Robin Williams' chart, or Joni Mitchell also has a grand water trine. SZA also has a grand water trine. Like, definitely use art as a way to access the astrology too. That would be my parting words.
I love that. And as we talk about Robin Williams here and just closing, like, what a chart of a beautiful soul's ability to create a container to simultaneously hold both joy and depth, right? I'm looking at the Sun sextile Saturn, right? With both Mercury and Pluto on the MC and the Venus moon. It's so beautiful, and I'm really glad we got to look at this chart because he was such a prominent figure and beautiful life, and I know that others out there felt transformation from his work as well, so I'm glad we got to honor him.
Well, yeah, I am too. And when I really need to just a break from the world, I'll just watch an interview of his. And you don't just laugh your ass off. You also have a sense of really like that Cancerian like care. There's something that just feels caring about it. And I don't know what he was like in real life. I don't have the experiences, but I do remember one story. I remember watching. I think it was Matt Damon was being interviewed about their experience of filming in Boston when they were doing Good Will Hunting, and he he just said to, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck at that time weren't who they are now. They were just, this was like their big breakout, right? So no one really knew who they were. And Robin Williams, Steven Spielberg was shooting another movie in Boston, somewhere, I think over by the State House somewhere, and he just said, "Hey guys, want to go meet Steven?" And they're like, "What?" Like, just like, yeah, let's just go meet, and like to make the connection, right? To make the introduction. I just thought like, that's such a cancer. Like, let's all come over and just, I'm going to take care of you and like mentor you and like, and did this movie. He's what got the movie greenlit. The studio wouldn't make it unless they got someone, with kind of a big caliber star to do it. And he agreed to do it. And obviously, the rest is history, but just had that kind of feeling of like, oh, I'm here to nurture as well. And so anyways, it's a beautiful chart and a beautiful life. So, thank you all for joining us this week. Any Scorpio last things that we want to, any
parting words? What did we say earlier? We said you're worthy, but it was more than that. Give me what it was.
Okay, it was, yes, Scorpio, you are worthy of everything, and you surround yourself with only those who are worthy of you.
That's the Scorpio mantra. Not only are you worthy, not only is your depth a gift, some people are freaks like you and like it, like us.
Yeah.
And everybody else you're just going to look at like, oh, God.
Nasty.
Whatever. No.
And that's okay.
and that's okay. That's okay. So thank you all for joining us today. Ooh, we're almost there, Alex. Let's keep going. There we go. Where can everybody find you, my friends?
You can find me at the number 9livesastrology.com. I am also the number 9 Lives Astrology on YouTube and Instagram. On YouTube, I put out all kinds of weird stuff like the art things that I was mentioning, Astro Weirdos. I've got informational videos on Jupiter, how to find your Time Lord, and every Monday I do transit reports. So check me out over there. Whitney?
Amazing. Yes, you can book a reading with me at astroarcana.com, and you can check out my podcast, House of Good Spirit, here on YouTube at astro.arcana.astrology, and use the same handle to connect with me on Instagram.
And you can find me at alexamorosi.com. You can book readings with me there. You can book one of my kitchen sink readings, which is basically where we take out everything I know how to do, and we just kind of flow with where we need to go. And we do sometimes look at your chart, sometimes we look at some cards, sometimes I just read you intuitively, and we just go wherever the reading takes you to get to the information that you're seeking. And you can also find me at Substack at The Subtle Universe. And there's a free subscription option there. It's a new and full moon newsletter every month. There's several levels of paid subscription too, and you can find all the details on that there. And we want to just thank you for joining us today. We love being with you every weekend. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate Adam's support for being here. And we hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. Take it easy.
Happy weekend!
Bye!